Hi, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ingalls Gunn, and today I am sharing my first foray into the 1940s. The vintage guidebook, Thistle and Stitches, and So Biased are hosting the World War II Sewing Challenge, and I really wanted to participate in this. And there is a whole series of guidelines that occurred during the 1940s regarding fashion rationing and how garments had to use specific fabrics and closures. And I will link to all of that on my website, and you can find that down below in the vintage description box. So everything that I made here fit that perfectly, right down to all of the measurements, such as your skirt can only be 30 inches in length and only have a certain number of seams, and your blouse can only be 22 inches long. So although it's stated that you weren't really supposed to embellish your blouse, how I skirted around the issue was that there was also a very popular trend called make, do, and mend. And that's where you used existing garments that were already in your possession to remake or refashion a new garment. And if you've been a viewer of my channel or my website for any length of time, you know that I'm constantly repurposing other garments, fabrics that I find at estate sales and thrift stores. I would say at the very least, only about 10% of the things that I sew are ever purchased new. So case in point, this fabric was purchased from my friend Catherine. It is a vintage fabric, and I have shared in the next segment how it was very sun faded in spots, and it also had a few small pinholes and tears, and through careful cutting as well as placement in the seams and in the simple ruffle, I was able to hide that. So looking at me, you can't see any of that. I know it's there, but the average person would not be able to see it unless they were looking very closely. And if they were looking that closely, well, we probably have a discussion. And the fabric that I used for my blouse was repurposed from another vintage blouse that I had taken apart, and I also reused the rayon rickrack trim. And I'll walk forward so you can see the detail of that. And as always, I have tried to get the correct line, and there's our Grace. I'm filming this on a Saturday. Kids are home, husband's home, dogs are barking. Let's continue on. So I did try to select undergarments that were modern that would give me the similar silhouette. I do need to purchase some shoulder pads to really get the correct effect that the blouses from the 1940s had at this time. And so the two patterns that I used are a current simplicity pattern that you can find, and you can see that I recreated this view for my blouse. And then my skirt pattern was vintage, and I used this. And both of these options used very minimal fabric, which was the style, of course, the fashion of the time. Now, I also have a special treat for you in that we're going to be making a vintage 1940s inspired Valentine craft. So let's get started. I'm getting ready to start cutting out view 2 of this vintage simplicity pattern, and I'm using some old fabric that I found at an estate sale. Now it does have a wee bit of what appears to be sun fading in some areas, so I'm going to have to kind of carefully place my pieces and cut around that. Because this is a vintage pattern, it looks a little bit differently from our modern pattern. Our modern patterns normally have markings, but don't let that deter you from using these. For this skirt, I know that I need pieces H, E, and K, and it also shows how to lay them out using folded pieces of cloth as well as selvage. That means a single layer of cloth. And so I definitely have enough fabric for this. And then what you'll want to do is, okay, I know I need pattern piece H, and it's very clearly marked on the pattern with a letter so that you know which pattern piece is which. And then a lot of people sometimes get confused with what the dots mean. Like, for instance, here is 3 big dots in a row. If you use your insert, you'll see that the 3 dots mean that you place that edge on the fold of the material. And again, just going back to the photo, you can see that that's the fold of the material, and you place the pattern piece with the edge that has the 3 dots right there. And so just going through slowly, step by step, you can quickly master using vintage unmarked patterns. After cutting out all the pieces, I actually had very little fabric left, and I definitely will be saving that in case I need to make any repairs in the future. I did have some areas of staining as well as some sun damage and some pin tuck holes. I will treat this with fray check, but I opted to make these the ruffle detail of the hem, as you can see right here, because once this fabric is gathered together, then you really won't see those areas of damage, and the skirt overall I think will be pretty cute. This pattern requires a slide fastener or zipper for its enclosure, and so I went through my stash of things I've purchased at an estate sale, and I found this Talon zipper, and this was the packaging. But look at how cool this graphic artwork is. So needless to say, I will be keeping this packaging. I know that this is a rather strange crafting backdrop. You'll have to forgive me. Our house is currently undergoing some renovation work in various parts of the house. So trying to find a space where the light is good, I'm a little bit limited at the moment. So this is a Valentine inspired craft. And what we are going to make are these little tiny, can you see that? Little tiny sweet Valentines. And you can make them in any type of color. This particular style I'm going to use on my Valentine tablescape, and the person's name will be added to this little heart so that everyone will have a take-home party favor. And I have made about 12 of these, and what inspired me was, of course, I've started getting into 1940s vintage fashion. And this is my Grandma Mary and my Papa Jack. This was taken in 1941. This was my first attempt at a wet set pin curl hairdo, and I was trying to mimic my Grandma Mary, but I had inherited her collection of Valentines, and I have all the Valentines from her childhood in the late 20s and 30s, as well as Valentines that she later received in the 40s through the 90s. She was quite sentimental. And so these are actually some of the sweet Valentines that are from that era. Now, this one in particular was given to my mom from my Auntie Beth, who was my grandmother's sister. And my mom was born in 1947. This one was a little bit earlier from her friend Martin. She often talked about her friend Martin. And so I really wanted to take those images, and I found a whole bunch of images that were just darling. This little cowboy, he is so charming. And then of course we have the little servicemen. I will have each of the Valentine images that I used available on my website so that you can go on there and save them to your own computer. So basically, just like today, we have modern Valentines available, and then we also have Valentine cards that are very heavily influenced from the Victorian era, which I would say that was the height of really beautiful Valentines. And so just to give you an idea, I just, download the image and then I print it out on my printer. And so for this one, this ended up becoming this. And it's just you choosing whatever size you want to create. And so I wanted a Valentine that featured a little sewing machine. Isn't that darling? And of course, a little wooden spool. And then I just use scraps of scrapbooking paper, and I use a paper cutter to cut it to size. And then my Valentine images You can enhance them with glitter if you want. I often use stickles. So you just take your spool, and I have a hot glue gun here. So this is something that you will want to supervise children if you're using a hot glue gun, or you can use white craft glue too. So I just use the hot glue gun for each end of the scrapbook paper. So then it looks like this, and I'm gonna need to change my battery, so let's hold on. Now the next step is you take a little paper clip, and just at the very bottom you're gonna add a little bit of hot glue, and you're gonna place it in the center of the spool. So it looks like this. I happen to have red and pink and white paper clips on hand. And then you're just going to embellish the spool however you want. So on this one, I added a little bit of lace and a key. This one has a bit of ribbon and a pearl. So that is kind of cute. So let's do that again. So I'm just going to measure going around the spool and cutting it to length. So you're going to need some scissors. And again, just using our hot glue to secure it, or if you're working with children, then just use white craft glue. And you're just going to wrap that around just like that. And then once you get back to the end where it meets, just another little dab of hot glue to secure it. And then I'm one that I like to hide my seams. So these are just little pearl stickers, and you can also find them as little diamonds or colored gemstones in the scrapbooking section. So I'm just going to put that back there to hide the seam, and then a second one on the front, just as a sweet little embellishment right there. So then it looks like this. Okay, so if you're like me and you have these beautiful little bits of antique lace or little tiny leftover bits of ribbon, this is the perfect project. So the next thing I'm going to do is kind of decorate the base of that paper clip. So we are just going to tie it on right at that base, and then I'm going to trim these little tails. I like to do what is called a swallowtail trim on the ends, and how you do that is you just fold your ribbon or lace in half and cut it at a diagonal. So then it's a little swallowtail at the end. Perfect. And then I'm just going to finish it off with some more of the red ribbon. In the essence of time, I pre-made this one. It's kind of, and then we're just going to add a little dab of hot glue. I love the cobwebs that you get from hot glue. You know, just kind of, and if the ends of the ribbon are kind of a little bit wonky, you can hot glue them down so that they kind of then lay down. So we have this, and then it's just a matter of taking our little Valentine images, and I have a little red heart, and of course my little sewing girl, and you're just gonna attach them to hold in the paper clip. And so this is, of course, a larger size spool. I wanted to do a larger size so that it would be easier to see on camera. But of course, I've made several of the mini size spools too. And it's really just, this one is really charming. It has a little tiny rhinestone detail and a velvet ribbon, you know, so you really just can use up your paper scraps, your tiny bits of lace, and these are all things that you may have on hand, so it would be very low cost, no cost, which it definitely fits into the make, do, and mend of the early 1940s. I hope you have enjoyed this first dip into the 1940s. I'll be back next week with another 1940s sweetheart dress that I plan on wearing with my sweetheart to a Valentine dinner. And as always, I appreciate a thumbs up. And if you'd like to be able to be notified when a new video is uploaded, you can hit the subscribe button in the corner, and feel free to leave me a comment below talking about some of your favorite Valentines that you've received over the years. Thank you so much for watching.
Oh boy, Pony! Hi! Are you my Valentine? Are you my Valentine?
Yes.
Huh?
I love you, Gigi.